Hey everyone, welcome back to Japan by River Cruise. I am Bobby Judo, I'm calling in from Fukuoka.
Hello everybody, welcome to Japan by River Cruise. My name's Ollie Horn and I'm calling in from a place called Penang. It's great to have you here.
We've got a fantastic show lined up. In the news, some Japanese and foreign women are raising concerns about sexual objectification and pornification in public spaces, but luckily a bunch of men are around to shout them down. And we'll talk about that. Plus, as always, Ollie has your recommended river cruise for the week, right, Ollie?
Yes, this week's recommendation is another central Tokyo river cruise called the Influencer River Cruise. An unlucky mistake with the English translation of the Katakana word influenza meant that the majority of the guests on the maiden voyage were foreigners hoping for their annual flu jabs. More on that story later.
Also, you may have heard of how the famous writer Natsume Soseki once said that I love you can be expressed in Japanese as the moon is beautiful. But later in the show, I'll tell you about the modern wordsmith who contends that, in some contexts, saying I don't even like river cruises can be a subtly Japanese way to convey that you want a divorce. Spoiler alert, it's my wife. But first, soap talk. Hey Ollie, I would like to ask you how your week's been.
Thanks, Bobby. It works well for the format.
Convenient. It's convenient, isn't it?
It is rather. I went for a Diwali party. I was invited to a Diwali party because I'm multicultural and I get invited to things. And sat down at a table with a group of people that I didn't know. I only knew one person at the party, which was the host, and a very tall Dutch man, or I didn't know he was Dutch, went, "Oh, hey, Ollie." I went, "Oh, hey," and I definitely didn't know this man. And he went, "It's great to see you again." I went, "Oh, okay." He said, "Yeah, don't you remember me?" I said, "Oh, I'm really sorry. Have we met before?" He said, Yeah, you were really rude to me a couple of weeks ago." I said, and then he went, yeah, here with my girlfriend. You said that I had yellow fever. And I was like, oh, okay, this is a comedy thing then.
He's an audience member who, was in the audience for a bit, right?
And every once in a while this happens, that the reality clashes with the protection that you get with your onstage persona. And
right.
Two things are at play here. One, obviously, for an audience member that's being picked on by the MC, you're going to remember that interaction, right? It's very difficult in 3 or 4 weeks to forget what that MC looked like and to forget that experience. But for me,
absolutely.
But for me, he's doing lots of shows. Obviously, I'm not going to remember every single interaction I've had. And
you've had a similar interaction with lots of people in the crowd. That's like a go-to crowd work bit for you while touring in Asia, right?
Yeah, precisely. And I was also I was hosting a show, so the stakes are a bit lower for me. And also I didn't speak to the chap after the show. Sometimes if I've spent time talking to someone, I try not to pick on people. Like, I really do think that it's better if you can, that the audience member that you speak to in a comedy room goes away feeling like happy that you've spoken to them, rather than feels like you've picked on them. But
right.
No matter what you say, people will feel like they're being picked on or they're being singled out, because they are, right? But obviously I ran my yellow fever bit, and it's just convenient just to have a white guy with an Asian woman sat next to them, to kind of highlight my point. And so he didn't seem very cross about it, but he went, you accused me of having yellow fever. You were really mean to me. I said, and it's just these moments where I just have to go, I'm sorry. Like there's no other way of reacting other than going, that's my job to do that.
Did he actually take it personally though?
No, I don't think he did. I think he found it funny. And also I wouldn't have run the bit if I didn't see that they weren't a couple that were laughing and were on board with it. And normally what I'll do is I'll make if I run that bit, I'll make a subtle gesture to that part of the room and kind of let the audience fill in their own punchline. And then normally I'll spin it as a positive, right? And I'll run a bit about how I think the whole world should be people from different nationalities having sex rather than the same. So, I never really mean. But of course I understand that you're singled out, and that's probably the most risky bit of crowd work I would do, because that is kind of based on someone's own personal choices. Actually, that said, right, so I was doing the show in Jakarta a few weeks ago, and it was the first time that someone has threatened physical violence against me. Did I talk about this on the podcast? But basically, I I was due to do my hour show Pig in Japan. There was no warm-up pack, so I kind of had to warm the room up myself. So I walked on and just did 15 minutes of basically crowd work while more people were filing in. And they're trying to find chairs for them.
Right.
And for some reason, this one guy sat in the second row on a table full of alcohol, just started heckling in a really hostile way. It wasn't kind of good-natured stuff like I was doing. It was he shouted like, "So is that you in the photo then?" There was a big screen with my photo on behind, and he went, "Oh, is that, are you wearing the same jacket now, but it doesn't button up?" Or he was just trying to be rude for no good reason. I hadn't even really
right
spoken.
Off the bat, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I hadn't spoken to him. And it was one of these things where I was just trying to explain to the audience as well, who didn't really know they're about to see an Edinburgh Hour. I was kind of running through the motions of, hey, what you're about to see is a show with a beginning, middle, and end. So, don't worry too much. This isn't the kind of show where I'm going to be picking on you. Just treat this like you're watching a movie. Sit back, relax. If you want to get a drink, I'd recommend you get some in the first half, because there's going to be stuff in the second half you won't want to miss.
Yeah.
Or, blah, blah, blah.
It's nice because like you're there trying to set the tone, and he was like, I am also going to make it clear that I'd like to set the tone that I'm going to be a dick for this.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just so out of the blue and so unwelcome. And I just said, I just said to him, what are you hoping to get out of this? And I just shouted something else out. And so what I did was I used an old comedy trick. I just went, Dad, you've got to stop doing this, to get a laugh, right? And then I just kind of went on this little flight of fancy.
That's really a standard crowd work thing where somebody heckles and you go, "Oh, come on, Mom," or "Oh, come on, Dad."
Yeah, exactly. And it's easy and it gets a laugh. And so he didn't really find that very funny. I said, so my dad, he comes out here to Indonesia 3 years ago, claiming that he's here to retire, but we all know that's just a euphemism for to die. He's here on his third Indonesian wife, and look, I get on with all of them, but it is getting a bit much. And I was just kind of running this, little story, right, just to get some laughs. And he shouted, "That's my wife you're talking about." I said, I wasn't actually talking about your wife. I didn't know you had a wife. He said,
in the fictionalized version of the crowd work you're doing, where I am your dad, you are talking about my wife.
Yeah, exactly. And then he goes, "That's my Indonesian wife, and she's my first wife," right? And so I just paused and I went, well, if I had a wife, I probably wouldn't call her my first wife. I'd just call her my wife. And that then got a big laugh, and it made him really, really cross. And so for the rest of the show, he was super agitated. It didn't work really to pacify him. He didn't say anything else because he knew that it wasn't going to work out well for him, because we had one or two other kind of back and forths, which I, without wanting to use combative language, because I don't think comedy is a competitive sport, I won. But that is to say, all the odds which were stacked against him didn't work out. Anyway, then it got to he just sat in silence for the rest of the show, laughing at some bits, but kind of getting up and down to the bar, not really engaging with the show. And then at the end, while people were filing out, he came up to me and kind of grabbed my arm and he said, "You listen to me. It's fair enough to make fun of me, but you do not make fun of my wife." I said, "I really wasn't making fun of your wife. I didn't know you had a wife. And I was just talking about a wife in the abstract." He said, "Don't you give me in the abstract." as if that's a stock. He said, "You need to be really careful, son." And then he kind of gripped my arm tighter. I said, "Are you threatening me?"
Okay, so he's playing into the father-son role play thing as well.
yeah. He was really getting into it. Have I let you down, Dad? And he said, "You're making fun of me having an Indonesian wife." I said, "I absolutely wasn't. I didn't know you had a wife. I was just making a joke." And I said, "I'm sorry if your marriage is that fragile that a joke undermines it." And at this point, he realised that his kind of physical threats weren't going to work. I was a bit taller than him, and he was kind of surrounded by other people that were on his side. Also, he didn't have any of the room weren't on his side. Right, the moment I kind of made a joke that put him down, that was getting big applause. He felt quite isolated. And as people were leaving, people were saying to me, "Oh, don't worry about that man. He's a known prick," kind of thing. And anyway, I said, "Why don't you take your hand off my arm? I understand the show wasn't for you. You can leave." He said, "Yeah, well, the whole thing wasn't that funny anyway." I said, "There's a good chance you might be right."
Well.
But yeah, it is funny, isn't it? That occasionally, reality does bite, and you meet people that you've done a show to, and you don't have all the protections of the fact that you're in a comedy club, and you still kind of have that adrenaline and persona.
Quick bit of housekeeping real quick. Today, while we were prepping for this, Ollie said he had a real short soap talk, so I should have something lined up as well. And as we stand now, we've finished a third of the show. Also, if you are interested in picking up tickets for the JBRC live talk shows circuit that we're planning, you can go ahead and contact our ticket seller, Teresa Pangoli Elimelt. You can find her contact info on Facebook. And we do have some mail from the original.
You have to explain this. You have to explain this.
I mean, the Bryans know what it's about.
So basically, the story goes that Bobby got approached on Facebook to buy some tickets for a show in Tokyo that he was in.
For my own show it was 2 weeks ago. Okay.
It was so clearly a scammer, but Bobby managed to string this scammer along for the most epic, poetic, beautiful love story that I have ever written.
For 4 days. It was fantastic. If you'd like to check it out, you can check it out on Facebook. I'll also probably throw it up on Twitter in the next couple of days. My Twitter is just @BobbyJudo. But if you would like tickets for any events at all, past, present, or future, please feel free to contact this person and ask for
they seem to have
tickets.
Them. What was great was it started off saying, I've got 2 tickets for sale, and then you managed to persuade them to sell you 10 tickets.
Oh, yeah.
They don't flinch.
Right off the bat, I got them up to 8, and then when they said my payment didn't go through, I said, "Oh, good, because actually I need 10." and then when they told me that they couldn't sell me the tickets for last week, but they could sell me tickets for an Invented show in mid-November, I was like, "Oh man, my friend Alex is going to be really bummed. He was looking forward to going last week." But
one of my personal highlights was
a lot of fun.
The times when you start to flirt with each other. It's clearly a bloke, right? It's obviously a man doing this because
it's got to be a dude.
No woman gets that aggressive. And so one of the best moments is when they make their first attempt at flirting with you, where they go, "Lol, you're funny at times. I kind of like the way you talk," which only serves as fuel for your fire when you get suspicious that all of their PayPal accounts have different names, and you're like, using all these names, what's your full name? And they go, "Oh, my name is Pangali Elimeld Teresa
Pangali Elimeld." Yeah.
And you respond with, "Jesus, that's so pretty." It's just great. Check out Bobby's Facebook.
Yeah, if you'd like to check it out, there's some great screenshots and some pretty funny stuff in there. But let's look at our mail from the original Brian. He writes, "This message is brought to you by the Japanese Association of Tanning Salons for Foreign Transgender Bodybuilders." And he says, "Please tell the fake Brian that no one cares about rugby anymore because Japan lost. Oh, and that he misspelled the second rugby." So from Ollie and I just want to say congratulations, Brian. You win the podcast this week. And now it's time for the news.
Bobby, what's in the news this week?
Okay, so I've been doing social justice on Twitter again. Good times.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, somebody's got to do it, you know. There's a couple of related stories that I've been following on Twitter and kind of chiming in here and there about over-sexualized and pornified artwork. One is that the Japanese Red Cross has put up this animation drawing of their character Uzaki-chan, and it's a very, the idea is to kind of get people in to give blood, but it garnered all of this negative attention like right off the bat because it's this kind of like, she's dressed like a waitress, she's carrying a tray, and she's got enormous breasts that are thrust out, her mouth is wide open, and she's in this very, very porny posed position. And this is on a poster that's up in public spaces for, you know, trying to get people to come in and donate blood. And a handful of Japanese women, a handful of foreign women in Japan. It started with Japanese women saying that this constitutes a form of sexual harassment. And even in the West, kind of like creating a sexually uncomfortable environment for a certain person or for a certain gender or for a certain sexuality constitutes sexual harassment, right? So this sexually objectified female character on this poster, people are saying that this is environmental sexual harassment. And a handful of Japanese women started tweeting about this, and then a handful of foreign women in Japan started translating, and it's not just women. There's an account moderated by a guy too who was translating kind of what these women were saying into English, and there's been this huge kind of like Japanese right wing plus foreign otaku guys who love, it's all male, but it's like guys who love Japan and Japanese anime who've all of a sudden jumped in on this and said it's not sexual harassment, it's not objectifying women, it's not sexualized, it's just a drawing, this and that.
Right. So let's break this down. The photograph, or rather the illustration, the manga, does depict a lady looking. She's kind of doing that like face flustered thing where she has 4 fingers that are kind of splayed out, fanning her face like ooh, like that.
Yeah, and she's got the flushed cheeks.
Yeah, and so this poster would be better served for another medical purpose like breast screening. And I think so. Let's start by first principles. Firstly, anything that gets people to donate blood is good, right? Because more blood needs to be donated. But there are obviously limits, right? So we can't get people to donate blood against their will, for example. So like that's one limit we draw. And what this debate is about is, do we draw one limit as a sexualized poster, even if it works to get people to donate blood?
Well, there's no disagreement that sex sells, but the debate here is whether or not it's appropriate in a public space. I mean, I think they are targeting a certain kind of clientele, and the Red Cross itself has stated that they don't consider this sexual harassment and that it has led to an increase in blood donations. But at the same time, like anybody who's arguing that this is not sexually objectifying women and contributing to an environment of sexually objectifying women is just trolling. They're just being like deliberately obtuse, because so these are not naturally portrayed big breasts. And this is not, it's like that superhero thing where, you know, they draw female superheroes with bodies that wouldn't hold their internal organs and like off balance, so they wouldn't be able to stand up and walk around. This is clearly a porn pose.
Yeah, they're eye-catching. Also, the breasts are like the most. Like, they're the biggest. They're the biggest thing on the page.
So I actually, and they're dead center. And I actually saw a Japanese woman replying to a Japanese man who was saying, "You're discriminating against people with big breasts." And this was a Japanese woman writing in Japanese that women with big breasts do not stand like this. Breasts don't hang like that. They don't wear clothes like this. This is ridiculous.
Well, and also maybe it was looking to kind of appeal to like the kind of otaku, these hikikomori guys that are into this kind of thing, and maybe this is a good reason for them to leave the house for the first time.
So that's funny, because one of the Twitter users has given up a theory to why they're doing this and why this has led to increased blood donations. It's because specifically it's popular with anime otaku, and one of the conditions for you to be able to donate blood is that you have not had unprotected sex in the last 6 months. And so they're using these like over-sexualized figures to appeal to guys who don't have sex because they're safe to take blood from.
You're also not allowed to have gone abroad either. Because I remember when I was at my university campus, so for newer listeners to the podcast, I spent my first 2 and a bit years in Japan at Kyushu University on a postgrad research program, all doing very intelligent stuff, might I add. And there
Super
was a big
smart.
Red Cross.
Ollie's very smart.
Thank you. And there was a big van in front of the cafeteria saying, "Come and donate your blood." And I thought, great idea. This is the kind of thing that I should do, contribute to Japanese society. And before I could even get close to the van, I got the Japanese like katakana version for no, right, in Dave Guttridge's words.
Right.
The guys from the Red Cross were giving me a nice big cross with their arms to say, "Do not come close." And so I obviously approached, and they said, sorry, no foreigners. I said, oh, but like, I think I meet the conditions, right? Because like, I hadn't been abroad for 6 months, certainly hadn't had sex with a new partner within 6 months. And there were 3 or 4.
You don't need to qualify it. You can just say you didn't have sex for 6 months.
you need to be, generally healthy. Well, au contraire, Bobby, as you revealed on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, I did find a girlfriend incredibly quickly after having moved to Japan. And maybe one day on this podcast I'll tell the story of how that ended. By the way, there's a story I'm not going to tell you on the podcast, but I went on a date with someone who listened to the podcast, and I realised I've got to be careful what I say because people can do due diligence on me based on what is said on this podcast. They can.
It's public record.
Yeah, it's not good. Anyway, and so they just said, we can't accept your blood because foreign blood is generally different and it often can't be used. It's discarded. And I was like, right, okay. So what does that mean for me if I need blood, right? Because if I go to hospital and I need blood, then surely I'm going to. So I said, I was like, can I just give you some of my blood for me? You just hold on to it for me in case I need it.
Just mark it. Type O for Ollie and leave it there.
they didn't, or kind of G for Gaijin.
Yeah.
What's your blood type? G. Totally incompatible with the Japanese. But they didn't see the funny side. So I thought it was quite sad that I couldn't give blood because in the UK when you give blood you get unlimited free biscuits.
Huh.
For the duration that you're giving blood. It's not just like a subscription. So what was the conclusion of this story?
Well, so let's link it to the next story because this is a very closely related one. One of the things that it's made me think about is not only kind of like the objectification of women in media and the public space in Japan, but also, I mean, you know how foreigners tend to come over here and get really surprised when they go in the convenience store and they see all the porn magazines just like out where anybody can see them, usually like at the eye level of children.
It is absolutely absurd, isn't it? And also what's funny is like obviously some of them are sealed all the way around so you can't open them. But I've seen blokes just like what's it called, tachiyomi, right?
Tachiyomi,
where people just
standing and reading
read magazines.
Tatsu means to stand, yomu means to read, so they're just standing in the convenience store and reading magazines.
There's also another word which is tachinomu, or tachinomi bar, which is a bar where you stand up. Yeah. And
tachigui, standing and eating.
What else is there? Tachifera. And
what?
I just made that up.
It would require an extremely tall partner.
Thank you. And all 6'2" of me, baby. 6'2". Those are two separate measurements, by the way.
Classy stuff. But anyway, yeah, so non-Japanese people will often be surprised when they go in and see like these very explicit covers of porn magazines, even if you can't open them up. And as you mentioned, like guys standing there breaking the seal and reading them in the stores. But this takes it to another level because this is about the cover of the magazine Shonen Jump, which adults read, but it's for younger people. It's for teenagers.
What's it about?
For kids. It's a manga compilation magazine, and usually they'll have like a cute girl in a bikini or something on the cover, but it's a compilation of a bunch of different kinds of manga stories, and they're serial. So like every month a different one comes out, and it'll have the continuation of like, I don't know, like 15, 20 different manga stories. One Piece was originally published in Shonen Jump, a lot of things like that. And the
what
most
does Shonen Jump mean?
Shonen means young man, and then Jump just means jump. It's just Young Man Jump is the title of it. So the most recent one, I guess, and I don't know, I don't read manga, I don't read Shonen Jump, but apparently this is a serialized manga that is about a 15-year-old girl. I think her name is Yuna-chan. And the cover, she's floating in the water of an onsen and is completely naked. And this is the cover of the magazine. She's floating in the water in the onsen. She's completely naked. And her breasts are coming up out of the water. Also huge. She's also kind of posed in a very pornified pose.
Do breasts float?
Yours do, don't they? So, since they're not supposed to show genitalia and they're not supposed to show nipples, what they've done is they've done this artwork so that in the place where nipples should be, there's glare. There's like light and glare and it obscures where the nipples should be. And I don't know if you've ever looked through like any of these compilation magazines, but a lot of the ones that are aimed at slightly older people have like, not explicitly, but have like pornographic stories or sex scenes in them. And the way they get around not being able to show genitalia because of their obscenity laws is to have like a phallic shape that's just whited out. So,
right, okay.
So if a woman's going down on somebody, or if a guy is having sex, or if he's exposed or whatever, it's just a black and white drawing and then like a cylindrical white spot where his junk would be.
I mean, to be honest, I've never really wanted to read erotica in Japanese because my Japanese literacy is just not good enough. It just takes me too long. So it'd be like watching porn on a 56k modem. Just take too long.
So what they've done here is they put glare over the spots where her nipples would be, so it's just whited out. Except they've done something tricky, because on the page behind the cover, on the back of this cover, is a manga illustration of a bunch of girls going to eat or to drink tapioca, I guess. And so they have tapioca pearls positioned in such a way on the back page that they're these inked in red, pink tapioca pearls that if you hold the magazine cover up to the light or put a light on it, you can see the drawing on the other side. And the tapioca pearls are positioned in just such a way that they show through as nipples. And it's hilarious to me that they've done this.
A lot of ingenuity, isn't it?
It's lunacy. It's ridiculous, and it's so much work, because it's not just those parts that show through. The whole parts show through. So you can also see, like, in the middle of this woman, like right in her belly button, there's a picture of a girl like eating and yelling something, and then the tapioca pearls that they've drawn on the back. There are 4 of them, so yes, 2 show up in the place of nipples, but 1 shows up right in the middle of her sternum, and like, it's just
so it looks like she's got a mole that needs removing.
And it reminds me, like you said, 56k modem, it reminds me of when I was a teenager and we had a cable box and we didn't have the Playboy channel unlocked, so it would come through all scrambled, but every once in a while in like one of the little bars you could see something sexual. And it's like, this is the level of desperation of the people that they are pandering to with this. Like these guys are going to look directly at the nipples and ignore the weird growth in the middle of her chest and on her chin and like the text block through her nose. But it's the cover of a magazine for kids. And the fact that they did this deliberately, it's so desperate and sensational, and also contributes to this environment of objectification of women. And so there's this woman who I recently started following on Twitter, Sachiko Ishikawa, and she's half German, half Japanese, raised in Barcelona, but speaks Japanese and is moved here now and lives here with her Japanese husband and does her whole life in Japanese. And she was instrumental in starting to translate. Again, she raised her own concern. She started like highlighting Japanese Twitter users' concerns about this, and was instantly jumped on by all of these incels, like all of these Ni-chan, 4chan, right-wing crazy guys, mostly foreigners, who are, A, criticizing her right to discuss Japan because she's not authentically Japanese, and also jumping through all these hoops to try to defend this basically pornographic picture on the cover of a kid's magazine.
Just on that authentically Japanese thing, that there might be some listeners that don't quite realize, one, her being like her genetics only being half Japanese is enough of a hurdle, but the fact that she's lived abroad for a long period of time itself would also be enough for Japanese people to discount her opinion as being somewhat impurified and westernized. And I don't mean this in a sensational way. I know people that have that work in the HR department of very, very large Japanese firms who put it as a minus point on a candidate's application if they spent more than 1 year abroad, because 1 year abroad is enough for them to kind of open their eyes and maybe learn a bit of English. But if they spent longer than that abroad, then there's a chance that they might have become fully westernized and
infected. I think you mean infected.
That's what I mean.
But it's just ridiculous to me. So I think her objection, which I agree with wholeheartedly, is that it portrays women as objects. It's just this. And there's
also,
so much.
Is a child, by the way, on the cover. This isn't a woman, is it? It's a
No,
child.
she's
And what I
supposed to
understand,
be. The character is 15.
And it's not actually it's a ghost as well, from what I understand. It's not even a.
So it's a dead child. Okay, it's a dead child.
So
good.
So what they've done is they put nipples on a dead child.
Yeah.
In order for young people to get aroused by it.
So one of the arguments that I find hilarious from the people who are defending this is that there's actually too much sexual repression in Japan, which I'm not saying is not true, but their argument is that this is something that will alleviate sexual repression and it counts as a form of sex education, which is just like ridiculous because it has nothing to do with actual sex or actual sexuality at all. It's this unreality of a woman as an object, as a sexual object. And like the idea that consuming that kind of media doesn't affect your behavior is just crazy to me. I think there is a certain element of Japanese culture that has a healthier attitude towards sex as opposed to like the Judeo-Christian sex is something to be ashamed of or something dirty. But there are people who are trying to argue that this is more akin to like a European sensibility where nudity is not something to be ashamed of or sex is acknowledged as something that happens and you don't have to hide nudity or sexuality from children. And I think that sensibility is a healthier sensibility, but that's not what this is at all. Like that is not what this is. This is raunchy and it's commodified, it's pornified, and there's a big thing even in children's animation like One Piece. It's unrealistic proportions for women, it's hypersexualized bodies. Even in things like Doraemon or like stuff like that, there's a sense of naughtiness, but whimsical naughtiness around things like looking up a woman's skirt or snapping her bra or walking in on somebody in the bathroom. And the point that these women who are objecting... I wouldn't say
that's naughty, I'd say that's illegal.
Oh, it's totally illegal. And the point that they're making is that it normalizes this behavior. And there are all of these guys jumping all over and say, no, it's not. Don't impose your Western morality on Japan. It's a different culture. It's a cultural thing. And it's like, it's a culture of sexual harassment. I think that there is a place for pornography. I think that there is a place for sexual expression. But I think that definitely... there are consequences to the kind of pornographic media that you consume affects your behavior. I think that if you're going to put your foot down and say we're entitled to our porn-posed, sexually objectified blood drive mascot, and you think it's okay to have that, then go ahead and have it, but, accept the consequences of it. So then I think you should have the blood taken directly from where it is in your dick.